different tangent. We are so thrilled to have Jodie here speaking about fast fashion and about her time in Bangkok, which is very exciting. So we'll get onto that in just 1 second. But to begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and that's the Wurundjeri people. And we want to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I think, I said this last time and I think we need to reiterate it, the original custodians trod lightly on this land and we are learning to do the same, and that's our aim. So that's exciting to be able to do that in the theme of what today is. A couple of little practical things. Some people have already found the colouring table. It's not just for children. Sometimes people just need to be able to do something with their hand while they're listening, so you're welcome to go up the back. If you need the bathrooms, straight out the double doors you came in, women's on the left, men's on the right. That's, I think, all the important information. Now, Kate is going to introduce Jodie to us and ask her a couple of questions, then we'll get started. Thanks.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Speak now. So excited to have Jodie here with us today, and not just because she's a dear friend of mine that I've known, I reckon, since you were about 14 years old, probably. But because I'm at that point in my life, like many of you are, that I'm really starting to get quite concerned about our planet, about the way we are kind of running things, running systems, running society, and you know, I'm really keen to think and be challenged about how I can adjust my behaviour and stop buying quick, cheap clothes because they make me feel good for a little second. There's so much I want to tell you about Jodie, but what I want to most point out to you is that she's pretty ordinary, really. She's actually pretty average. She grew up like much like you did in Melbourne. I'm going to ask her a few questions about it in a minute and unpack that a little bit. But she doesn't have any superhuman, like, superpowers, though she did do something quite extraordinary with a couple of young kids, her and her husband. Chris packed up and headed off to Bangkok to live a very different life in a very different space with very different people. Our kids are roughly the same age, a bit younger, and at that stage I could barely get out of the house to go to the post office, let alone go to Bangkok. So obviously something really strong kind of drove Chris and Jodie to do that. And thinking about their superpowers, I think they are like love, compassion, a real compulsion for justice and to see justice, faith, and a good sense of humour as well. And also they're both youngest children of 4 children, so I think that says something too. They're kind of like, what the hell? I mean, what the heck? Let's just go and, you know, and do it. So thrilled to welcome you both here to Eltham today. Jodie, do you want to come up and I'll ask you some questions? I think do a dance or something.
Sorry.
Yeah, just use that one.
Let's get rid of that. So I've made boasts about how ordinary you are. So, Jodie, can you hear?
Yeah.
If you hold it up, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So just take it out.
Doing well. I'm not good at this. Right. How was it? Okay. All right. We've got this, Kate. We got this. Jodie, tell us just a little bit about where you grew up, where you went to school.
Yep. Yeah, I grew up not too far in Mount Waverley, so very ordinary life, as Kate said. I went to Mount Waverley Primary School, and then I went to Mount Waverley High School, and that was pretty much it.
And Jodie, if I was to put a plate of food in front of you that you could not refuse, what would be on it?
There'd be a few things on it, actually. It'd probably be a pretty big plate, I'd hope. I can't resist chocolate. I can't resist snacks, actually. Snacks is my thing. Yeah. It's terrible. Yeah.
What app on your phone could you not live without?
Can we skip to the next? No. It's a bit embarrassing, isn't it, when you think about the things that you spend a lot of your time on? And I do spend a lot of time on Instagram. I get lost in those videos that just keep coming. It's terrible, sorry.
I've just discovered those videos.
Oh,
they are dangerous, aren't they?
I get lost.
Yeah. I know. If you had a free Sunday afternoon to do whatever you wanted to do, what would you do? And as a follow-up, what do you find you generally do with your Sunday afternoons?
Okay. If I had a free Sunday afternoon with no... Oh, look, I do love going for a nice long walk. That's something I really enjoy doing. I'd love to go exploring and doing further beyond just, local sort of tracks. Or going to the beach, that would be another thing I'd love to do, but often we end up doing housework and getting the kids ready for school the next day, and just the stuff at home that needs to be done. Or lying on the couch actually and probably watching some TV, which is, the default.
Yep. Yeah. Moving to, the last sort of chapter 15, 20 years of your life, can you just give us a quick idea? No, actually, tell us where you went and what was the sort of context for going and reasons for going.
So back in 2007, I think it was, we as a family, we had two little ones at the time, we had two girls. We decided to move to Bangkok, as Kate said, and we moved into a community called Klong Toi, and it's a slum community or an informal settlement, so no one owned the land, everyone was squatting on the land. We chose to live in the community as opposed to sort of moving and living nearby the community and working, going into the community. And we kind of went as learners. We wanted to learn about the community. We wanted to learn about what the issues of poverty were that our neighbours faced on a daily basis. It was driven from a faith, like a desire to share, or a desire to actually live a life that wasn't about me. I wanted to. I recognised that I had so many resources. I had an education. I had opportunities to do lots of things, but I wanted to do something meaningful with my life, and ultimately, serve people that didn't have those opportunities.
There's so many questions I want to ask, like, how did you do that? Like, what, can you describe your living situations briefly? Like, what, so surely you still had like a nice apartment, all those luxuries. We had our house was quite small, so we lived in a house. It was 4 metres by 6 metres, and two rooms that size on top of each other. So it was a 2-storey. It was made from sort of fibro sheeting with like a corrugated iron roof. Very basic sort of space. And we had a third daughter while we were living there. So we had 3 girls living in that space. So for the first probably 10 years, our older 2 daughters shared a double bed. We had a double bed. And then when Millie came along, she just was either bumped between that bed or our bed, and she slept on the floor as well. So literally on the floor, sorry, on a little blanket. It was terrible, sorry. She's turned out all right.
She's turned out all right.
Great. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so that might do for me, I think. I have one more question, but
we can ask questions after. I'm happy with that too.
So thank you for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kate. It's actually a real privilege to come because I do have this long history with Kate and Tim and Briley and Kate and Steve and Raph and Sally. Our paths have crossed, and it's lovely to reconnect. So, living in Bangkok was an incredibly life-changing experience for me. So we went probably with a real expectation and hope that we would go and change the world. But the reality is we probably were the people that were changed. I'm going to tell you a little story about a little girl. Her name was Durham, and she was one of the little girls that we met probably within the first few months of living in this community. And the thing that you couldn't help but notice the first time you met Durham was that she was blind. You could see it because her eyes had sunken into her skull. She often just had her thumbs in her eyes, and she just sat in the same place every day. She sat under a tree, which was just a stone's throw from our front door. Her life was defined by poverty. She was blind because there was an attempted abortion when her mum was pregnant with her. She was dumped with a grandparent who didn't want her and didn't have the resources to look after her. She wasn't able to go to a school that could actually teach her Braille or how to do all the things that a blind person needs to learn, because it's so much more complex being blind. So her days were spent between her little home, her little shack, and she had learned to navigate the little narrow alleyways and all the obstacles there, and to get to the tree where she sat. And that was her life. She spent between her home, navigate those little alleys, and to the tree and back. And that was Durham's life. And she would often sit under the tree and sing. She would often sit there, and we'd hear someone sing, and we'd be like, "Oh, who's singing?" And it's the national anthem. And we'd go, "Who's singing the national anthem?" And you look out, and there's Durham, and she's singing the national anthem. It was pretty cute. On one occasion, we came home and we had to cross. There's a bit of a courtyard, like a concrete area at the front of our house, and it was like a public space. So it was where everybody gathered, and that's where the tree was, and that's where Judy sat. So it's where all the kids would play. It's where our girls learned how to ride a bike. And there's 100 people in this space about as big as this hall. They're weaving through people and kids and dogs. And there's one day we were walking across, and there's kids running around. They're all squealing with delight and laughter. And then we hear them saying, "Move out of the way," in Thai. And then we turn around, and at the last second we kind of jump back, and there's Durham. They're teaching Durham how to ride a bike, and she's crying. So you can imagine that didn't end very well. But she was willing to give it a shot, but in the confines of the community. Why do I tell you the story of Durham? What does that have to do with fast fashion? Not very much, but it does have everything to do with it as well. I think that we can actually be a little bit like Durham in our blindness when it comes to issues like fast fashion. We actually probably do know a lot. We probably don't realise how much we do know of this issue, and we choose to ignore it because it's inconvenient or it makes us feel uncomfortable. And we can actually, just go on about our days and crashing into all these things and these realities, and that our choices are having these massive impacts on others, and blindly go about continuing the same, making the same choices. We've got a few. I'm not very good at using these things, so I might get sidetracked, but let's try it. I just wanted to give you a really short look at what is fast fashion, because I reckon maybe there's a high percentage of you who know a lot about it. There's probably some who've never really thought about it, and there's probably a spectrum. So let's just give you some facts. Fast fashion is basically the fast-paced design and production of clothing. So it's happening at a really fast rate, and it's enormous in terms of the amount that's being pumped out. It's massively low cost. So the reason we can get such low cost items in the shops and we go, wow, that's so cheap, is because they're producing so much, and where it's being produced is a lower cost to the producers. And it does rely on us. So actually, fast fashion is a whole big picture. It relies on us being we're the impulse buyers. We're like, got to get that. It always has this sense of, it's designed to create a sense of panic. You know how like you go into a shop one day and you go, oh, I see that's a really cute cardigan. I really like that. Maybe I'll just think about it and, trying to be a bit more, let's be mindful about my purchases. But then you go back the next week and it's gone, you go, oh my gosh. So the reason they do that is because they want to create a sense of panic buying. The industry is actually set up to make us buy things we don't actually need or maybe even want. let's get the lowdown on some of these realities. Can you go to the next one? If it works, we'll try it. Yeah, go for it. So this is an alarming reality. We buy 400% more clothes now, today, than we ever have in history. But as a society 20 years ago, where we probably were consuming a lot, that's like 2000s, we're consuming 400% more than then. But we're spending less than ever. So they're producing more than ever as well, and we're paying less per garment. Keep going. One of the things, driven to maximise profit, because it's all about the money for these industries, fashion industries. Fast fashion, so the production of clothing has been outsourced to places like Thailand, like Bangladesh, like India, like China, where there's not highly regulated spaces for people to make sure that they're cared for. And it keeps the costs low because they're paying nothing for it. Okay, so what's wrong with fast fashion? There's so much wrong with it. Let's get to it. Fast fashion, you may not realise, has a massive environmental impact. When I'm just going to read some statistics that are actually really terrifying. So scientists do say that this industry is placing an unbearable strain on the planet's finite resources, which is a reality when you hear the statistics. I'm going to just read you some. The consumption of water and clean water, particularly in communities where clothes are manufactured, is usually in poorer communities. But the water that's consumed, so to make the production of one pair of jeans and one shirt takes between 10,000 and 20,000 litres. So this is the equivalent, that sounds like, that's a lot of water, I can't even imagine. This is one pair of jeans and one shirt, It's the equivalent to one person drinking 8 cups of water per day for 10 years. And we happily go and buy a new pair of jeans every season. And the impact of that on the community means that they don't have enough water to feed their crops or to feed their families. Massive. What about water pollution? Textiles are believed to be the biggest contributor, that's actually terrifying, of microplastic pollution in our oceans, and believed to be responsible for 20% of global wastewater pollution. That's enormous. The carbon footprint. So I'm just going through some of these hideous facts. They're boring, but they're really hideous. Every step of the life cycle of a piece of clothing. So this shirt, at some point, was cotton or other fabrics. At every point, there's a carbon footprint. Right up until it's still in my closet, and when I wash it, that's still having it. There's an environmental impact. So right the way through. And I think often we don't think about that every item of clothing is constantly having impact. Fast fashion accounts for 10% of global carbon emissions annually. That doesn't sound like it could be possible. It is. It is thought to be the second largest industrial polluter behind the oil industry. That's actually alarming. To put it into perspective, this contribution is thought to be more than all international flights, this is pre-COVID, this statistic, all international flights and shipping combined annually. That's a massive footprint. And this is just from the fast fashion industry. Textiles are the fastest growing stream of household waste. Okay, so this reality of this, because of the high production and this high turnover, we start to then change the way we view clothing as disposable. This is what it does to our minds. And so 73% of materials used to produce clothing are landfilled or incinerated. This is conservative estimates from those who have been doing the research. Other estimates suggest as little as 20% of textiles globally are reused or recycled. That's not a very high percentage. Yeah. It's a sobering reality. Let's go to the next slide because it doesn't stop there. The fast fashion industry has an impact on the poor. So it's hard to kind of comprehend how does it impact the poor, but with some of those statistics I've just told you about the way water contamination, the use of water. So some of these really poor communities just don't have clean, safe water. And so that impacts health. So some of the statistics out there talk about the high percentage of cancers and other waterborne diseases because of the pollutants in the water. Where am I? Yeah, child labour. It still happens. I think sometimes we forget that it's a reality. Like I know years ago when I was a teenager, there was kind of like a bit of a spotlight on all that, but it actually still happens today. And even people in our community, we know people who have left school at like 10 years old, 11 years old to go and work because they have no choice. And so these poor communities are kind of stuck in this system that actually then promotes it and abuses it. Sweatshops, they still exist. Some of the issues with sweatshops, they exploit people through long hours, unregulated systems. What else was up there? Yeah, the low wages. You know, people still in Bangladesh, like back in, was it 2015, that collapse of that, do you guys remember? And that kind of brought a spotlight again onto fast fashion, and there has been a lot done since, and there's a lot more regulation, but it's still not enough. These issues still exist. Some of the reading I've done, there are people still today in places like Cambodia and China getting 6 cents per hour. 6 cents per hour. Even if the cost of living in those places is low, and some of those places it's much lower than here, you cannot survive with that. It's not a living wage. And some of these places, people are forced to work 7 days a week, and often working shifts up to 19 to 20 hours. So these are the appalling realities. Let's go to the next slide. The bottom line is, and 3/4 of clothing exports come from sweatshops. That's actually quite terrifying, isn't it? This is the bottom line. Every piece of clothing, every new piece of clothing, bears an invisible price tag that is paid by poor communities and the environment. And I think this is where the rubber hits the road. When we think about buying a new garment, we need to think about the invisible price tag that is not hanging on that garment. What is the real price that's being paid for this piece of clothing? I first met Jodie when I'll tell you about when I met her in a minute. But Judy was the oldest of 5 children. She grew up in an impoverished part of Bangkok, and she had she had gone to school up until grade 3, and then her mum said, "You need to leave school because I need you to help with the kids." And this is a very common story. This is not an unusual thing. This actually happens in many places around the world. So she did. She had to leave school and help look after her brothers and sisters. When she was 13, her parents needed actually extra financial help, so they asked her to go to work. So she lied about her age, and she went to the local factory, which was down the road, and told them she was the legal age of 15. She was employed at a garment factory that made underwear. She spent the next 10 years of her life working in that factory. And the working conditions, she told to me, she often worked 12 to 14 hour shifts. She was paid less than the minimum wage, which at the time was less than $1 a day. The factory had no circulation. There was no fans because they couldn't risk the impact on the production line. And it was in the sweltering heat of Bangkok. Now, we found the heat oppressive. It's hard to imagine when you're kind of sitting in the comfortable sort of confines. Like I actually still forget how hot it was. But by the mid-morning, so by 10 o'clock, she said the temperatures would be already in their mid-40s in that factory. There was a tin roof, and she worked, her job was to do the curve under the bra. That was what she did all day. So she would get the piece in whatever form it was, and her job was to just sew the same curve for 12 hours a day. She often had to work usually had to work 6 days a week, that was the norm, and occasionally was made to do overtime, so had 7 days a week. She was not allowed to speak to her co-workers because that would impact the production and that would impact, the efficiency. So she never got to know her co-workers because they had to meet targets. So she got incredibly, she found it incredibly oppressive, and she felt as though she was no longer human because her voice didn't count. And she found the physical pain of sitting in the same position for long hours torturous. When she finally was able to leave this job, when she fell pregnant with her own child, and just before she gave birth, she resigned. And she said it was a relief to finally be out. But then she spent the next 2 or 3 decades working jobs and just trying to make ends meet, and never really had enough income to support her family. So this is the story of many of our neighbours in Bangkok. So Badui is just one of many of the people who have experiences, have either worked in factories or have encountered some form of oppressive kind of reality because of the fast fashion industry. When we moved to Bangkok, we didn't have an agenda to start a project or to let's do something to deal with fast fashion. But the reality was we saw that our neighbours really struggled to get to have meaningful work and to have dignity in their work. We recognised that there were Baduis all around us. We had neighbours who would get up at like 2 or 3 a.m. just to go to the market to buy fruit. They'd come back, cut it up, put it into bags, and then sell it in the hope that they would make 1 baht, which is the equivalent to 5 cents, profit on each piece of fruit. Like, that's hardcore, like to make 5 cents profit and getting up those hours, and just in the hope that by the end of the day they had enough to feed the family and to pay for their kids to go to school. I mean, this is just the harsh reality. So because we had little kids and we sent them to a kindergarten that spoke English because we thought it was important for them to learn both languages, we actually met a lot of other English-speaking people in Bangkok. So we started to meet people who were quite intrigued by our life. And you live where? Because they didn't live the same kind of life we did. But what happened was it became a bridge. So our connections outside the slum became a bridge for people in the slum. So Second Chance was something that was birthed, is a project that was birthed. And we've got a little video here, and that's going to explain far better than I will. So watch the video, and
You just need to stand up, not that one.
Oh, not yet. Yes.
Keep talking for just a minute.
Keep talking for just a minute. What we didn't expect, so we recognised that people would come to us. So I'll give you the lowdown. People would come to us and say, "Oh, I've got a whole bunch of toys, or I've got a whole bunch of clothes that my kids have grown out of. Can you give them to some of your neighbours?" And we just thought, oh, well, we could, but that's going to set us up really badly in the long term, because why does that neighbour get like a bag of clothes and that neighbour doesn't? And so we recognised really quickly this is going to end badly. So we actually took that as an opportunity to say, well, maybe some of our neighbours could sell it. Maybe we could set up a little op shop. And so that's essentially what was birthed. And I'll let you watch the rest. Okay, so the concept's really simple. We run a second-hand shop, and the donations that are given to us by expat communities can be dropped off here, or we can pick them up. We have a group of people who go and collect things every day, and it comes here. Then we have a team who sorts through the items. They label them, they price them, and we bring up some of the clothing, and the women are able to then transform those unwanted, unloved, worn out items and turn them into something really beautiful.
Tôi ขึ้นมาก็อยู่ที่คลองเตยแล้วแต่ว่าไม่รู้ว่าอะไรเป็น ก็มีช่วงที่แบบชีวิตลำบากพ่อเสียคือทุกอย่างมันยากแล้วมันเปลี่ยนทุกอย่างก็ออกมาข้างนอกเจอเพื่อนทดลองเป็นยาเสพติดใช่ไหมคะก็ลองทุกอย่าง
Before I just work in the hotel, right, in the cruise line ship, and then just working for myself and my family, just want to collect money and move from the communities. But since I work with the SCB, it's changed my vision inside. It's changed. Like I feel like I have more than enough. I should be grateful what I have, and what should I give back to the communities.
So when we started Second Chance, we anticipated that it would create some employment and maybe provide access to good quality second-hand goods for people in our community, and that we felt like that was actually meeting a really important need, and it really does. But the deeper stuff is the stuff of the self-worth and dignity, living in a slum where the common thread or the common voice that they hear is that you're not good enough, you deserve this. We're giving an alternative voice to that. We're breaking down those lies and saying, hey, no, actually you are worth so much, and we think that you've got so much to offer, and we want you to discover all those things that you have to offer as well.
ถ้าเด็กที่เหมือนแบบว่ามันกำลังจะเสียคนหรือว่าไม่มีที่พึ่งทางไหนเลยแล้วเราได้มาทำงานที่นี่เราได้รู้จักทุกคนผู้ใหญ่สอนเราในการทำงานมันทำให้เด็กคนหนึ่งอะค่ะมันมีโอกาสได้เรียนรู้โลกที่มันกว้างกว่านี้ค่ะ
To give a chance to people who need a chance, a second chance of their life, not just a working place. It's like a second home.
ทำงานที่นี่นะคะมีความสุขเหมือนกับว่าเจ้านายก็ไม่เหมือนเจ้านายบอสนี่เหมือนเพื่อนกันเลยเหมือนญาติกันนะคะอยู่ด้วยกันมีอะไรก็ช่วยเหลือกันแบ่งปันกันนะคะมีความสุขมากที่นี่ไม่ว่าจะเป็นข้างบนข้างล่างเหมือนกับน้ำหนึ่งอันเดียวกันเลย
มันทำให้ชีวิตเปลี่ยนเยอะมากจากเป็นคนที่แบบไม่ชอบให้คนอื่นมาดูครอบครัวไม่ชอบให้ใครมาแบบอะไรเป็นคนที่ค่อนข้างแบบมีกำแพงสูงแบบsecond chanceทำให้เรารู้สึกว่านี่คือที่ที่เราอยู่ได้มันไม่ใช่สร้างโอกาสให้เราคนเดียวลูกด้วยเราไม่ได้รู้จักเป็นสังคมที่ดีด้วยมีคนรอบข้างก็รักลูกเราด้วย
For me, my hope is that the work that we've started here of people starting to believe maybe that they do fit somewhere, that they do belong, that they do have worth, that's the stuff that I really hope continues to grow. It's wonderful when we invite the women often to come to when we have sales, and watching people look at their things and adore them and say, wow, they're beautiful. And for them to hear that affirmation and to believe, wow, I have a talent and I have something to give, and I created that. And that, I love that. That's one of my favourite things.
Second chance เป็นโลกใหม่อีกโลกหนึ่ง
ครอบครัวค่ะ
เป็นร่มเหมือนร่มโพร่มไทรของเราเลยค่ะ
ตัวช่วยที่ทำให้เราประสบความสำเร็จได้เร็วขึ้นครับ
second home รักตรงนี้เลยค่ะไม่ได้แค่ชอบ
เป็นชีวิตของเราจริงๆ 100%
Okay, so the concept's really simple. We run a second-hand shop, and the donations that I got to share my life with you actually saw, Jodie was actually one of the women on that. So she started working at Second Chance probably about 10 years ago. And a few years after she'd started working there, I asked her one day, I said, what's your favourite thing about working at Second Chance? And she started to list off things. She's like, oh, it's great, I get to work in air conditioning. Oh, and I also have the flexibility of working from home. This is pre-COVID, obviously, where working from home wasn't a thing. I've got the flexibility to work from home if I have to look after my granddaughter. And I love the community. I love that, I have friends. And then she stopped and she goes, but you know what? My favourite thing is that I get to be creative. And so this is Jodie, who used to do that one curve underneath the bra. For 10 years, that's all she did. And now she was making, she said, she would take a pair of jeans and a shirt and turn it into this incredible bag. And so from the start to the finish, she could see this thing transform. And I think it's a beautiful picture too of her life that we got to see, from being something that was, kind of like, oh, there's not much use for that anymore, to seeing it transform to her believing that she had purpose and worth. There's a lot that we can do. I think it's easy to kind of get bogged down in the tragedy of this industry, but we actually all can make a difference. It starts with us. And I know at times I actually feel a little bit overwhelmed and think, how will my one little purchase actually dent this whole industry? Because it's so big, it's so beyond me. But we have to start somewhere. But there's I've made a bit of a list of things that we can do. So resource yourself. Actually get to know the brand. So if you have a favourite brand or if you have a favourite shop, actually do the research. Find out what their ethical standards are. Find out where the things are made. Find out who made your clothes. It's a really important question. And the resources are out there. There's incredible websites that you can access easily. There's apps you can download around fashion. Do the research, because everyone will find something that connects with you and that you can take. There's the Baptist World Aid actually have an ethical shopper's guide, and I was hoping to get some today, but they didn't have any. They're too popular, which is great, right? But get your hands on those sorts of resources. Educate yourself, because that's how you're going to make a difference. Reduce. So I've kind of gone with the 3 R's that we have always been taught. Reduce, reuse, recycle. But there's actually a lot more we can do. And but start by reducing the purchases of new clothes. Often we actually forget that in the back of our cupboard there's that dress or that jumper, or because it's deep in the back. And reduce the amount of new clothes you buy by re-wearing what you've already got. That's a really great place to start. Resist. At the heart of this whole fashion industry is actually them trying to convince us that we need more, and convince us that we are not enough unless we dress a certain way. So a form of resistance is actually to say, well, no, actually I know my identity and I don't need to dress that way that you're telling me I have to dress. In fact, I feel really comfortable wearing this and I've got that already in my closet. That's actually a really great form of resistance. Boycotting brands that actually have been shown and the spotlight's been shown on them, that's a great form of resistance. Boycott those brands. Eliminate purchases of new clothes altogether. That's a really big step, but if you can do it, that goes a long way. Imagine all of us in this room collectively stop buying new clothes. The producers, the manufacturers, they're going to listen. Reuse. Statistically, most consumers use and wear items of clothing only once. That's actually a terrible statistics. I mean, not all of us are like that, but the statistics that they're researching is probably between 16 to 25-year-olds, and that's the reality of that generation. Reusing is considered the most effective and sustainable way to manage waste and minimise emissions as well. So by reusing what we've already got in our cupboard. So some great ways of doing that, reusing is op shops. They're a great way to buy clothes and minimising waste. Organised clothing swaps. I hear that there's one. Sally?
We have a slide.
Okay, great. Excellent. That's okay. I'm jumping the gun. But clothing swaps are a great way to, you're sick of your clothes, that's fine. But your friends have probably got clothes you could have. What are some other things? Repair. I remember my nana when I was like 15, she used to come and stay with us. And she used to sit, and you know what she would do for that week? Like while she was doing other jobs, but in between there was, you know, she would sit down and just darn our socks. I don't think I've ever done that. And I think this is a reality, that I'm part of this whole system that kind of goes, oh, it's disposable. Once there's a hole in it, I can throw it out. Whereas in reality, if we actually look at the value, that sock and the impact of that sock being made and the cost to the environment and those communities, if I valued those things, I would actually repair that sock. And my daughter actually brought it up the other day because she was telling me she had a massive hole in her sock, and I said, oh, just throw it out. She goes, Mum, that's the problem. We've got to start thinking differently, you know. And I said, well, why don't you learn how to done? Anyway, that's another thing. Yeah, run your clothes until they wear out. I don't think I've ever actually worn out a piece of clothing because I've gone, oh, I'm bored of it, and I get rid of it. My dad was the epitome of never throwing anything out. And he had threadbare clothes to the point where it's like, Dad, that is so inappropriate. You cannot wear that anymore, because he valued the reality that had, yeah. Repurpose. So you saw on Second Chance we repurposed clothing. We turned them into new things. Try upcycling. There are so many YouTube videos on how to upcycle a t-shirt or how to. So when it's got a stain, or you kind of think, oh, it's got no value anymore, turn it into something else. There's so many things you can do with your clothes. Yeah, let's become ethical consumers. I think the reality is we are all consumers. We can't go around nude. Like, I think that's that's a reality. But we are all consumers, and so what type of consumer will you be? And so if we can start to reframe the way we consume, then that's going to go a long way to changing the world. Durham, I'm going to just finish off with a story about Durham. So Durham was the blind girl that I was telling you about at the start. One day we got to take Durham with us. We ran a kids club as one of the activities. We would go to the other side of Bangkok, and there's this beautiful big park. And we would rent bikes, and so, you know, there'd be 50 kids all renting bikes and riding around because there was space, you know, and they just had a ball. So we would have a spot that we would sit down and we'd say, okay, we'd all ride there and say, okay, kids, go for the next couple of hours, meet us back here and we'll have lunch. And it was just the highlight of their week because they're in nature and they're not stuck in this concrete jungle. Anyway, Durham, we didn't think it was a great idea to just put her on a bike, given that you know, we'd experienced that. So we went, Durham, you can ride with us. So she would often ride at the back of Chris or behind me or one of the other helpers. And then once we got tired, which was long before the kids did, we would go sit at the picnic rug. And this one particular day, Durham was just sitting there, and a few of the kids started running around. They didn't want to ride anymore, so they were just running around. And we said, oh, Durham, why don't you come over with us? And so we grabbed her hand and we said, come on over to the grass. And it's just this big grassy area. And she'd never experienced anything like it. And we took her hand and said, come. And she was just like reluctant like this, because she's like, I don't know where I am. This is like completely foreign space. And she sort of was like dragging back. And Chris he just said, Durham, it's fine. You can't bump into anything. There's nothing to bump into. And she's like, she can't even comprehend what that would mean. And so we said, Durham, just hold our hands. And so we started to sort of pick up the pace and we started running. And then eventually she sort of started to feel it and she's like, oh, yeah, wow, there is nothing here. And eventually she let go of her hands and she put her arms out, and it was like the scene of, from The Sound of Music. She's dancing in the grass with her arms swinging wide, and she was just free. And she was experiencing that freedom. And my hope is that children like Durham, not just the blind kids, but these kids in communities can experience the freedom, and our choices actually impact their lives. And if we can see that they do connect, then we can see that we can make a difference in people like Jodie, and we can be freed from the burdens and these chains, and we can run free, like Jodie. And so I just wanted to leave you with that story, and I don't know if I'm handing over to Kate. But thank you so much for having me.
Thanks very much, Jodie, for sharing all of that with us, sharing some really personal stories as well as some incredibly practical ideas. And yeah, I just love that image you've left us with. That's just beautiful. And I think for myself, learning to do this kind of stuff and make the right choices and get a sense of who I am in the system that I can influence, that gives me that sense of freedom, and I don't have to be a slave to the Catholics and all of that. So thank you very much. We've got a bit of time for people to ask questions if they have any. There's no pressure to ask anything, and if there's all silence, then that's totally fine. Yeah, do you want to, or just ask?
It seems like a lot of websites, especially, or just anything, they say sustainable when you're buying something. So do you have any advice on people choosing what's actually sustainable?
Dig a little deeper, because there's a lot of, because it's kind of the throwaway line at the moment, sustainable. If you dig a little deeper, you'll actually find out what they mean by that. There's also a lot of labels that say green, or there's a lot of labels that say, green is a very typical one. And then if you actually look on their website, they have to, by law, actually say what does that mean. And often it's a token thing, like it might, So that would be my tip, just look a little bit deeper. So and the label's not going to tell you that. The label will say the words that they want you to believe. It's a great question though. Yeah.
Sort of a follow-on, I'm just jumping in. The follow-on from that is, so the Baptist World Aid, you said, have their resource, whatever. Are there reliable sources of ethical brands and unreliable? Using a resource like the Baptist World Aid, they've got nothing to gain, they're not part of the fashion industry. So it's really important that you find your information from people that aren't in to benefit. So that guide is excellent. There are some online apps. I used to have one, I can't remember what it's called. Ethical user guide or something like this. And if you just scroll through, it's actually really clear, and they give a rating based on all the different things. So, how does it treat people? What are their environmental impact? It's quite clear. But if you use a scale like that that's been produced by the fashion industry, just be really careful, because what are they benefiting? Yeah.
How's Second Chance going today? And is that model scalable at all?
Yeah, I'd love it to be scalable. Yeah. Yes, it's still going. So we left at the end of 2020, and that was really difficult leaving. We just loved our work. It was just the right time for us, family-wise, to come back. But it's now still operating with Thai leaders, so they're all from the community, which is great. They've all been trained up, and they're all, running that and doing a really great job. Scalability is such a big challenge, because to start anything up, especially in an impoverished community, needs a lot of resources to just get it started. But we have we've had a lot of people even approach us and say, could we start up Second Chance Beijing? I think we had an email, and then we had, can we start up Second Chance a couple of other countries, people who were in other contexts. And we said, one of the things with any sort of response like this, it's very specific to our community. And so I think any kind of project needs to really be listening to what does that community need, and is this the best response for that community. But yeah, I think there is definitely scalability if it's the right fit. Yeah. Yes.
You lived here in Melbourne, you guys lived here in Melbourne, got married here in Melbourne in 98, then moved to Bangkok 14 years. When you've come back, are we better or worse in this instance? And in your opinion, Do you think we're improving, or do you think you look and go, oh, this is really bad?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. I've probably got a tainted lens, I would say. I think all those years in a context like that, where you start to change the way you see the world. So I do come back and I go, what is wrong with this place? So that's probably not the most helpful thing. But I do think in terms of fast fashion, I think that there are more, like what I see when I go to the shops, which I avoid as much as I can because it's soul destroying. But I do see just like the turnover. I just kind of, I'm like, oh, I don't remember that being in the window last week and that wasn't that, you know, or so I feel like that's that changeover. And having teenage daughters and seeing their friends and how much they spend on clothes, or what my daughters tell me they spend on clothes, I'm horrified. I'm like, I never would have spent that when I was their age. So yeah, it's a bit subjective, but yeah.
How much do you think online shopping, especially in the last couple of years, has helped contribute to this, or helped to, well, yeah?
Oh, I think it definitely contributes. Yeah, because all the big brands that would probably be big manufacturers, would be very happy with people still buying online, because we don't. I think there's still impulse buying. In fact, you know, look at the messaging on the things like only 2 left. That's actually to just make your brain go, if I don't get it, I'm going to miss out. And there's probably 1,000 left. You don't know that as a consumer, and so those little subtle messages are there just to make us into impulse buying. So there's so much. I could have gone on for hours about the boring realities, but there's actually techniques that the marketers use that tap into our psyche. It's actually hideous and make us believe that, yeah, we will be less than enough, and really actually tapping into our identity, and yeah, it's quite awful. Yeah.
Got time for one more.
I've got one.
Yes, perfect.
Do you have any advice, like on how we could advocate for these communities, or like create pressure for governments to make change in the regulations and things like that?
Yeah. I would look at Fashion Revolution is a really great place to start. They're an organisation that do advocacy work. So you could sign up with them and find out how you can do, because they've got masses of resources. So you could take it into your schools or into your communities, or letters or examples of letters that you can write. And so there's been, since that Bangladesh collapse, the factory that collapsed, there has been some major changes, but there's still a lot that are unregulated. So yeah.
Thanks again, Jodie. It's wonderful to hear from you. I'm going to hand back to Sally.
Thank you so much, and I think we collectively want to say thank you for doing the work that we would love to do but not love to do. And it's inspiring to hear that you did it. And yeah, we're probably all left a little shell-shocked that is the kind of life you chose based on your faith, based on wanting to make the world better, and still continuing to lead that project is amazing. A couple of things I know we've gone over, but that was our technical glitch. Technology is your best friend and your worst enemy at the same time. But I do want to say 2 quick things and show a video. So if we've got the slide there, I haven't even seen it, but it's about a clothing swap. I don't have any more information, but guess who does? Annie, could you put your hand up if you would like to know about the local clothing swap that is coming up? Don't worry about this slide. Yeah, just go and talk to Annie. When you're having a tea or coffee, search her out. She's wearing a green top, as most of us probably are, but you'll find her. Secondly, as we usually do, we want to promote next month's event. So we've got a bit of a theme going on. We started with the environment. We've gone to fast fashion. Next month, we're going to hear from Michelle Kerr, who's from Eden. Now, Eden is a fantastic organisation that you might think make jewellery, and they do. They make beautiful bracelets and lovely earrings, and it's amazing. But the work behind that jewellery, the ministry that they have in Myanmar and other places is phenomenal, and you will be as inspired as you were today. So I want to show you that video, and then we will wind everything up. But don't forget, on your way out, you can grab a card for yourself, one for yourself and one for your neighbour. I'll give one to my neighbours, and that's your opportunity to bring people for next month's public lecture.
So Michelle, we are so excited to have you joining us for one of our Green Wedge Public Lectures. And Eden Jewellery is fantastic.
Nice.
Love it.
Very nice.
But is there more to Eden than jewellery?
Yeah, absolutely, Sel. The heart of Eden is to take a message of hope and love and opportunity to victims of human trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation, predominantly in the nation of Myanmar right now. The jewellery is really important to our program, but it is, I guess we could say, secondary. Our program is reaching out to those individuals that have been exploited and inviting them into safe shelter, giving them trauma-informed care, giving them health care, education, vocational training, creative therapies to help them recover from their trauma. The jewellery comes in where we see it's so important to break the cycle of human trafficking by giving people and giving the girls and the women that we serve vocation, like skills, giving them sustainable skills, so that when they've finished their time at Eden, they can go out into the world having, an increased sense of self-worth, of dignity, and knowing that they've got these amazing skills, that they can go out and get a job and be economically empowered with things that they've learnt whilst they were going through their healing journey with our Eden team.
That's so good. I know that some of the hesitation of people coming to hear you speak could be around this area of just feeling overwhelmed. This is such a big problem. I feel so helpless, and I honestly just can't hear it. They're the people who scroll past stories because, and I'm one of them. It's too hard to hear. Tell us why those people should be coming to hear you.
Yeah, look, it's a great point, and I'm totally the same, Sel. But the posture that Eden holds in everything we do, whether it be our frontline teams in Myanmar walking into those darkest of dark places, seeing those girls standing on the street corners being forced to be there, or whether it's our team here in Australia that aren't necessarily doing that frontline rescue but are working so hard to raise awareness and support our frontline teams. Our posture is hope, because if we don't work in this space with a posture of hope, then we will burn out. It's too overwhelming. We are paralysed by the enormity, and we just can't keep going. And that posture of hope looks like, human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world, but I would do it for one. And we can keep doing it for one. And the model that we have set up, on the front line there, is that we can keep reaching out and we can keep making a difference for that one. But back to the jewellery component of it, I guess, we can break the cycle by empowering people, by giving them new skills. It's a sustainable intervention that we're working with. So yes, it's incredibly heartbreaking, and there is so much going on in our world right now that is heartbreaking. But we want to come at it with, yes, it's heartbreaking, but each of us actually can make a really direct difference. And I'll be really excited to share more about how and what that can look like when we catch up in April.
I'm so excited. Last question. Will there be jewellery for sale on that day?
Oh yes. Right, if we want there to be, for sure. So I guess because it is so important for us to use the jewellery not only to directly go back in and finance our frontline work, which is why we have it out here and distribute it here in Australia, but the jewellery is also so important for us to wear here in Australia. And I'm forever telling the mums in the schoolyard or the people I see at at the cafe what the message of my jewellery piece is, and that helps us mobilise that message of hope around such a heartbreaking issue.
We are really excited to have you join us, and we will have the dates up on the screen. People can follow links and sign up and register for the event, or not, but either way we will be thrilled to have you join us. Thanks, Michelle.
I can't wait, Sal. Thanks.
So Michelle, we are so excited to have you joining us for one of our Green Wedge Public Lectures.
Or not. I didn't mean or not, don't come. You don't have to sign up. Just thought I'd clarify. It's now time for morning tea, which is sort of almost turning into lunch. Please talk to Jodie. There might be ways you want to look to further support Second Chance. We also have someone who's slipped into the back of the room, and that's Michelle Kerr, who was just on the video. So if you want to know any more about Eden, please catch up with her. And both of these organisations have used and hopefully will use the space we have in Weir Street. So we're very lucky to be gifted 2 shops. Marion uses one and Carol, and then the other one we've used to sell Eden jewellery and hopefully to sell some items from Second Chance Bangkok. So keep your eye out for that. That's a lot of information. Please fly, be free and enjoy the rest of your day.